If you had told me 10 days ago that I'd be leading off the week 2 recap show talking about how fantasy friendly the Los Angeles Rams are, I'm not sure what I'd have told you back, because this team was not fun down the stretch last year. Even with no Cooper Kupp, not a lot of guys emerged to be viable fantasy options. And even Cam Akers, I had my concerns around. If you had said, hey, a month ago it'd be the Rams fantasy friendly, maybe it's Cooper Kupp, maybe it's Cam Akers. Instead, we got Kyren Williams and Puka Nacua, and suddenly the Los Angeles Rams are one of the most fun teams for fantasy in the entire league. We're going to break down expectations for those guys going forward, other injuries and role changes across the NFL to recap week 2 and get you ready for week 3 in the NFL. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, here to recap week number 2 across the NFL from a DFS perspective, recap all the key usages, injuries to know, and also take a look forward at salaries on the week 3 FanDuel DFS main slate. We'll start things off with the headliners here, talking about Nacua and Williams in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Tom Vecchio has you covered with the solo shot every weekday still for the final couple weeks of the MLB regular season. That is right here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. UFC podcast with Austin Swaim back to being every week once again when UFC has cards as well. And of course, the Heat Check here for NFL with you every Monday and Thursday. Me flying solo on Mondays, Brandon Gadula with me on Thursdays to preview that week's main slate. To get all these, make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Solo Shot and Heat Check also go up on the FanDuel YouTube page and on FanDuel TV Plus. So go to FanDuel.com/watch to check out that, or check out FanDuel TV Plus on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku devices. We've also got daily fantasy for tonight. Monday night, a 2-game slate over on FanDuel with both single game slates as well. The Monday night special contest is a $9 entry with $600,000 in total prizes, including $100K to first place. Then check out the single game offerings for both the Saints at Panthers and Browns at Steelers. To find a contest that fits you and enter, go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's start things off here with our headliner for week number 2, and that is the fantasy-friendly Los Angeles Rams. Puka Nacua's absolute dominance continued once again this week. Nacua, 20 targets on Sunday. My gosh, he's up to a 39% target share for this year, and he's catching literally everything. So not only is he getting volume, but he's converting that volume because Matthew Stafford looks healthy right now, and Stafford, when healthy, is a quality quarterback. So they also gave him a red zone rush attempt, which means to me that they want the ball in this guy's hands when it matters. So everything lines up well for Nacua, and we've seen it for 2 weeks now with insane volume. I think 35 targets across 2 weeks. We got to buy into that. Now, the Rams are not on the week 3 DFS main slate because they play in a Monday night doubleheader against the Bengals next week. So we can't play and name that salary. We toss out a salary on FanDuel, and if our salary for that guy is higher than what's actually on FanDuel, that means they're a value. If it's lower, that means they might be a bit overvalued. But I think that also giving you a salary can kind of give you a baseline of where I'm at on this player, because if you're a longtime DFS player, you know what a guy with an $8,000 salary means versus a guy at $6,000. So I'm still going to toss out where I'd put these guys from a salary perspective if they were on the main slate to kind of give you a gauge on how I feel about them through 2 weeks. For Nacua, it's a quality quarterback in Matthew Stafford. He's getting a lot of volume and converting on it. And he's getting like some high leverage work too, in addition to the fact that he's getting all this volume. I think Nacua's salary should probably be like 8,000, 81, somewhere in there, which probably sounds very high because his salary on FanDuel this week was $5,800, but we've now seen it for 2 weeks against 2 very different defenses. I think that's enough where we got to buy in. So until Cooper Kupp is back, I'm going to view Nacua as being $8,000, $8,100 as being fair market salary for him based on the way he's played so far. Similar discussion for Kyren Williams. Cam Akers, of course, inactive for this game, and Williams was an every down back. He had a 96% snap rate. He handled 14 carries and 10 targets, and he also had 6 out of 7 red zone chances. The other red zone chance was a Nacua carry. So this is just an insanely fantasy-friendly team, both for a running back and for Nacua. So again, let's play the same process here with Williams as with Nacua, where let's assume that Williams were on the main slate. I feel like his salary would probably be somewhere in upper sevens, like 79 or so. I think that'd be appropriate. Now, I think if I were to pick either too low or too high on that for Williams, I might be a bit too low. I'm just skeptical that, like, given his body type, he winds up being a 96% snap rate guy for the entire year. Maybe that's wrong of me, but just a little bit skeptical there. He's getting a lot of red zone work. He's getting passing game work. Again, 10 targets on Sunday. Just some lingering concerns. Maybe 79 is like, maybe that sounds too high to you. Maybe I'm, hedging it for no reason. But they're pretty fun, and I don't think it's going to be entirely fluky. So Nacua, Kyren Williams, I think are two guys we have to buy into. And that game against the Bengals, single game slate for that will be insane because it's, I know Chase and Higgins haven't been phenomenal so far outside of Higgins in the second half on Sunday, but they're legit and they're going to be worthy of your attention for the single game slate and the 2-game slate next Monday night. Let's dive in now to some injuries here from week number 2 and begin things with Saquon Barkley. Sprained his ankle in the Giants' comeback win over Arizona. Barkley played all but a few snaps, so hard to get a read on his backup here. They play Thursday, so seems like a pretty short turnaround for Barkley to be out there. The Giants 10-point favorites against a very tough 49ers team, so that's not ideal. I would guess they lean on Breida here. Last year in week 18, Barkley sat, and Gary Brightwell did run ahead of Breida, but that was also before their playoff game, so they could have been saving Breida for the playoffs. So I'd lean towards Breida being the primary back, but it's not going to be a situation where anyone will be a certainty to be the lead back for the Giants unless we get some good reporting. And there are good beat reporters for the Giants. Maybe we do get that, but I'd expect it to be some sort of split in a very tough matchup. Hopefully Saquon is healthy soon because he's fun to watch, and this backfield is not going to be, I don't think, the most fantasy friendly without him out there. Jalen Waddle ruled out last night because of a concussion. The Dolphins rotated guys behind Tyreek Hill last night. Nobody other than these two, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, played more than 34% of the snaps among the wide receivers. Durham Smythe plays a ton of snaps, though. He has a 14% target share in 2 games while playing almost entirely with Waddle and Hill. I don't view Smythe as being an elite pass catcher. I was shocked when I saw his route run and target numbers last week, but if the salary is low enough, I could definitely at least see that. So let's pull up the week 3 salaries over at FanDuel.com and check in on Durham Smythe, see where he settles in. $4,800 taking on Denver. Not out of the question, I wouldn't say. Just because, again, he's going to play every snap. If Waddle can't go, that opens up some targets too. So that could work. Braxton Berrios, other guy who is somewhat enticing. His salary is 51. Berrios, 3 deep targets in week number 1. He'd be my preferred guy among the receivers, but I think what happens realistically if we get no Waddle is that we downgrade the offense and downgrade Tua Tagovailoa. Tyreek Hill, pretty much status quo, because he can't really get more work. So his salary is 96. You can see here if you're watching on FanDuel's YouTube page or FanDuel TV Plus. He's at 96. Can't really get much more volume than what he's been getting. So slight downgrade for Tua if Waddle can't go. Maybe we get to Durham Smythe, maybe Braxton Berrios, but I feel like we need to be in a pretty rough salary situation to get to those guys. Another bummer one, Anthony Richardson ruled out in the second quarter due to a concussion for the Colts. He had already scored 2 rushing touchdowns before that time, so it just stinks if he misses time because he's so fun to watch so far. Gardner Minshew played well in relief of Richardson and completed 19 out of 23 passes. He averaged 0.43 passing net expected points per dropback. Again, passing NEP is numberFire's expected points model. 0.43 is very good. League average around 0.1 typically for a quarterback, so he was great. And I think that's big to see Minshew play well because we want competent quarterback play in this offense. And if there's no Richardson, that can be scary. But Minshew is at least fine. He can be fine in short stretches. The reason we want competent quarterback play here is because Zach Moss played all but 1 snap on offense for the Colts. He had 18 carries and 4 targets for 107 yards. he had 3 out of 7 red zone chances. We talked about this a bit on Thursday where Deion Jackson was awful in week 1 and Evan Hall is on IR. No Jonathan Taylor till at least week 5. So I think Moss is in play, even if Richardson cannot go next week. Now, next week they face the Ravens, and that's a very tough matchup. Indy 8.5-point underdog in that game, but it's still a guy who's going to get a lot of work, and the Ravens defense is beat up primarily in the secondary, more so than the linebackers. Don't really want to go at that Ravens front, but it's a really good workload. I would say Zach Moss's salary for week 3, considering the matchup with the Ravens, I'd probably put him in around 7,000 flat, and his salary is $6,400. So Moss might be a guy we need to go to, despite the fact his matchup is tough, just because Minshew can be good enough to get the job done. And that workload for Moss, at least in week 2, was good enough where I really would have a hard time passing that up at such a low salary. Moving on here, Joe Burrow tweaked his calf late in Sunday's loss to the Ravens. He said it's sore, but he was planning to return to the game if they had gotten the ball. The problem is that Burrow was starting to look a little bit better in the second half before than he had in week 1 and the first half of week 2. T. Higgins benefited, but I mean, he didn't look healthy. And now you ding up that calf once again. It does increase the volatility in this offense a lot if Burrow is not 100% for the near future. So looking forward to that Rams game next week. That's a tough spot. The defense is not tough for the Rams by any means, but it also means as a result, we're going to want to go at the Bengals for the 2-game slate. And I'm not sure what level of confidence we can have given Burrow's calf. It seemed to impact him in week 1, seemed to impact him in week 2, and now it's banged up again. I think that is a downgrade for this offense, given that Burrow is in a pretty rough situation for right now, and hopefully he winds up being okay. Devontae Adams is in concussion protocol after exiting Sunday's game. He has a 35% target share this year. It's uncertain if Jacoby Myers will be able to play next week. If both wind up sitting, I would just downgrade this offense in a pretty big way. They're on Sunday Night Football taking on Steelers, so a very tough matchup there as well. If both these guys sit, it's going to be hard for them to move football on the Raiders. If one of them plays without the other, I'd expect that guy to be a pretty big target monster for this offense because Myers actually out-targeted Devontae Adams before his concussion in week number 1, and both guys had at least a 34% target share in that game. If neither guy can go, I feel like we'll just see a lot of Josh Jacobs. I can't really feel good about projecting any of the other wide receivers, but Jacobs, 6 targets on Sunday. He'd probably get a ton in that Steelers game, and if with no Hayward again for the Steelers, probably to see a lot of Jacobs in that one. David Montgomery got ruled out of Sunday's game due to a thigh injury. Sounds like it's a bruise, and maybe he'll be okay, but Craig Reynolds mixed in, even with Montgomery being out. Jahmyr Gibbs, after Montgomery's injury, played 17 snaps, whereas Reynolds played 10. Sounds like Montgomery should be okay, but if he does miss time, Gibbs will get a ton of passing game work while holding some touchdown concern after he had 0 of 7 red zone opportunities on Sunday. The Lions next week are taking on Atlanta. That is going to be a very fun game from a stacking perspective. Total's 46.5. I think that's a bit low, personally, for this one. So we're going to have a lot of interest here. Gibbs's role was still not great. So let's check out what Gibbs's salary is here in week 3. I think it's probably going to get bumped up because of the uncertainty around Montgomery, and it should. But I still think the concerns would make him be, in my eyes, around like 66 or so as a fair salary for Jahmyr Gibbs. He's 7,000. So he did get that bump as a result of Montgomery's injury. I get it, but that's a little bit lofty for a guy who's pretty much a guarantee to have some touchdown concerns. I like the passing game work a lot, but, you know, if Montgomery can't go, we might have to be there, but like I'm not going to feel good about it, is what I would say with Jahmyr Gibbs. Darnell Mooney left Sunday's game with a knee injury and did not return. It kept Chase Claypool involved in this offense, despite the fact the Bears very obviously do not want him involved. DJ Moore was the productive one here. No shocker. I can't trust Claypool. It's more or bust for me if I'm going at this offense, even if Mooney does miss time. Now they're facing the Chiefs in week 3, so they're going to have to throw probably quite a bit, but I really don't want to get to Claypool unless absolutely forced. Let's just check really quickly what the salaries on Claypool, just because I'm curious. Claypool is 55. That's probably not low enough for me. And DJ Moore is 64. That's not bad. So DJ Moore could be the guy we turn to there as far as a bring back option for the Bears and for the Chiefs. Odell Beckham left Sunday's game with an ankle injury and did not return. John Harbaugh said he didn't think it was serious, so Beckham may not miss time. Mark Andrews led this team with 8 targets. Nelson Aguilar had 6. Zay Flowers had 5 targets for 62 yards. Rashad Bateman, 3 targets, still was not playing every snap. He played more snaps than you'd think based on the 3 targets, but it's not great for Bateman. I like Bateman a lot as a player, but his role so far has been very, very muted. Now, Lamar looked great. So I'll probably want to get to Lamar against the Colts. But if I'm stacking Lamar, I think it's really just Andrews first, followed by Zay Flowers. Maybe Aguilar winds up being a legit option, but I think to me, I'd really rather focus here on Andrews and Flowers in that order. Finally, Logan Thomas left the Commanders game with a pretty scary looking concussion. John Bates ran 18 routes to Cole Turner's 10. Jahan Dotson currently leads this team with a 19% target share. Terry McLaurin is at 16%, but he does lead with 4 deep targets so far. I think that McLaurin and Dotson get a slight bump if Thomas can't go. Bates will probably have an okay role, but I don't know if it'll be enough to consider him for DFS. So the Commanders next week taking on Buffalo, probably going to have to throw a bit in that game. I think it's more so benefiting. The benefactors there are more so McLaurin and Dotson than going to one of the tight ends. Let's shift now and talk about some role updates from week number 3 or week number 2 in the NFL. DeAndre Swift, awesome role for him with no Kenneth Gainwell on Thursday night against the Vikings. Swift, 76% snap rate. He had 28 carries and 3 targets. So we're getting a better idea of the pecking order on this team. Gainwell and Swift are very clearly the top 2 guys in this backfield right now. We just don't know how they'll rank when Gainwell is back, now that Swift has beasted out and shown what he can do in this offense. So there's a lot of uncertainty with Swift's role that we'll have to keep in mind. But every single touch or carry in this offense is valuable given how good this offense can be. So I think we're going to take cracks at this backfield. They're on the short 2-game slate on Monday. I just don't know what the distribution will be, given that we have not seen both Gainwell and Swift in this offense since Swift showed what he can do. So a lot of uncertainty there still with DeAndre Swift, despite the fact what he did Thursday was very, very fun. Mike Evans is getting a ton of work from Baker Mayfield right now. Across 2 games, Evans has a 29% target share with half of the deep targets, and he's been very efficient on those deep targets. I think he's caught 4 out of 6 deep targets for like 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he looks like Mike Evans of old, and Baker Mayfield playing some of his best football he's played outside of maybe that one playoff year. Chris Godwin, 23% target share so far with 17% of the deep work and 43% inside the red zone. So Mayfield is playing very well. Part of that is because of matchups. And he's definitely benefited from that. And he's facing the Eagles next week. Now, the Eagles secondary is pretty banged up, but I think we got to take note of what the Buccaneers have done through the first 2 weeks on offense. Yes, again, the matchups have been very good for them, but doing well in plus matchups is important as well. And they've done exactly that. So I think got to bump up Evans in a pretty big way for that 2-game slate on Monday. And in general, bump up our perception of this Buccaneers passing game because Mayfield looks good, Evans looks good, Godwin looks fine. And that means we can go back to viewing this as being an offense we can use in daily fantasy once again. We finally got a glimpse the Cowboys without a complete blowout here, and the offense revolved around Tony Pollard and CeeDee Lamb. Pollard had 25 carries and 8 targets. There was like that report last year where like, oh, we don't want to use him more than 30 snaps, but he had 30 opportunities on Sunday. He had 41 adjusted opportunities, which is carries plus 2x targets because a target is worth twice as much as a carry on FanDuel. Pollard also had 11 out of 23 red zone chances. Lamb, 13 targets, 2 of those were deep. So it's just kind of their offense right now. And Dak Prescott has looked very good across his first 2 games. Now, in week number 3, the Cowboys face the Arizona Cardinals. And the Cardinals have looked better than expected the first 2 games, but still a very plus matchup for both those guys. Let's play Name That Salary on these 2 guys here for week number 3. Pollard, a lot of work. Good matchup, good player. Offensive line is banged up. I think that salary is worth around $8,700. And Pollard's salary is 94. My goodness. It's fair. I get it. But is Christian McCaffrey on this slate? No, he's on Thursday. So we lose McCaffrey. Pollard might wind up being like the number one guy at running back on this slate, depending on the status of Austin Eckler. But like 94 is a little bit high. I get it. He's due for some. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns in week 1, but like probably due for some positive touchdown regression based on the work he got in week number 2. So a little bit higher than I thought it might be, but I get it with Pollard. As far as Lamb goes, again, high usage player, good offense. Maybe Arizona gives more pushback than we thought they would because of how well they played, at least yesterday. So that could be an okay situation. I would say Lamb's salary, give me around 82 for CeeDee Lamb in week 3. He's 85. So I think both the Cowboys guys got jacked up a bit because of the matchup here with the Cardinals, which again is very fair. They played very well, but we're not going to catch FanDuel sleeping on those 2 guys, but it's justifiable for sure. With no Austin Eckler, Joshua Kelly struggled for the Chargers, 79% snap rates. The lack of yardage, understandable given it's the Titans, who have like one of the best defensive fronts in football, but Kelly didn't get enough work in the passing game. Now he had a lot of routes, 29 routes, but just 1 target there. Maybe Kelly would have been more productive front, but it was pretty discouraging, I thought. What I did like, though, was the passing game. Justin Herbert had a 10.6 yard ADOT in this game, average depth of throw. That's the 3rd highest single game mark for Herbert in his entire career. Keenan Allen, 28% target share so far. Mike Williams, 26%. He has 42% of the deep work. I think Arrow is up on this offense, even though they did lose this game to Tennessee. They go on the road next week to face the Vikings, which is guaranteed to be the dumbest game on the slate. Very high total, though, so we're going to talk about it. I think I have a lot of interest in Herbert in that game just because of the ADOT being higher there. $8,400 for Herbert in week number 3. I get that. I think that's pretty fair. Not opposed to that. Not sure how much he's running right now. Let's check on that quick. Only 1 rush attempt on Sunday, 5 in week number 1. So not running a whole lot, but still pretty fun. Mike Williams' salary is 72, and Keenan's probably 8,000 if I had to guess. He is 88. Wow. Okay. Again, we are not going to catch FanDuel sleeping on these guys right now. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's a better offense from an ADOT perspective, but give me Mike Williams there when those guys had their respective salaries. I think that'll be the popular play is Williams with Herbert because of the salary, but like I'm a fish, I guess. I'll just go that way. Regardless, but in general, I like this offense more now than I did before. Same thing could be said about Derrick Henry. His role is much better in week 2 than week 1. Henry had 95 yards, but it came on 25 carries and 4 targets. Snap rate there, 73%. And the inefficiency is excusable because there was no Peter Skoronski in this game. Skoronski had an appendectomy, so hopefully he's back here soon. Skoronski, despite being a rookie, probably their best offensive lineman. But Ryan Tannehill played a lot better this time around, so Henry got better work than in week 1. Ryan Tannehill played better. Next week for week number 3, the Tennessee Titans are facing the Cleveland Browns. Very good defense, and that could be an issue for them, but short week for Cleveland, maybe that helps. Henry, I would say his salary for me back up to around like 83 is appropriate for Henry. He's 84. So that's pretty much in line with expectations. So I think Henry's fair at 84. Did get a pretty big boost up as a result of Tannehill looking more competent and the increased workload that he saw and increased snap rate. Bijan Robinson also had a better role in week 2 than week 1. 73% snap rate. He had 19 carries and 5 targets and turned that into 172 yards from scrimmage. Tyler Algier was still involved in the red zone, though. Both those guys had 4 out of 16 red zone chances. I'm higher on Bijan now than I was before, but that red zone issue is still there. And I'd expect Algier to play more in positive scripts. Now, they get the Lions next week, which is a very, very fun game. But I think that the comp for Bijan is kind of, I had said Aaron Jones last week, which I think was a bit low because Aaron Jones would split work with A.J. Dillon. Very, very efficient on the work he got, but split work with A.J. Dillon. I think he's more like Austin Eckler before Austin Eckler got all the goal line work. Like there was that time when I think it was Anthony Lynn was the head coach at the time where he didn't really trust Eckler towards the goal line, but Eckler's other workload was fantastic. I feel like that's kind of what Bijan is. And to me, that salary is like 85 or so, where the yardage upside is very, very high, but there are concerns around the touchdown equity. Now you can see Bijan here actually on the screen. His salary is 9,000, a little bit higher than I thought it'd be. But again, I get it. So based on looking at salaries right now, it seems like things are pretty tight for week number 3. So kudos to FanDuel for not sleeping on salaries here. They're definitely on top of things, but might be scrounging for some value in week number 3. With Aaron Jones out, A.J. Dillon's role was underwhelming. He played 68% of the snaps, 15 carries, and 1 target. He had just 2 out of 8 red zone chances. Dillon's still like a mid-range running back, even when Jones is out. And, we've seen this a lot now. I should have been more hit to that. I still didn't have like a ton. Like I had, to me, not a ton is like 30% or so. I don't know what my final number was on Dillon, but I don't know. I feel like I should have had less than that. His salary is 7,000. He should be around the mid 6,000 range. Now they get New Orleans next week. New Orleans still a good defense, but did lose a lot of pieces along the defensive front this offseason. So I'd really rather not go there unless he gets a major salary decrease. Checking quickly on Dillon's salary, 63. So they did bump him down. So that's fair. But probably where he should be. Sounds like Christian Watson will be back next week, but Jaden Reed has likely earned a role even when Watson is back. He scored twice on 8 targets. 2 of those were inside the red zone. I think we're going to see a lot of guys in the 6 target or so range in this offense, which is not great for DFS. They're facing New Orleans, toughest task they've had so far next week. So maybe that's where we see these guys come back to earth, but a little bit worried that they've got too many mouths to feed between Romeo Doubs, Aaron Jones unhealthy, Watson, Jaden Reed. That might be enough where maybe there are just too many mouths in an offense. It's not like elite. Like they look good, but they're not elite for DFS. James Cook had 159 yards from scrimmage on Sunday, but he lost a ton of red zone work. The Bills ran 22 plays from inside the red zone. Cook had just 1 out of 22 red zone chances. Latavius Murray had 5. Damian Harris had 3. Josh Allen had 3. So Cook is going to get yardage, but it might be tough to get him touchdowns. So keep that in mind when you look at projections on touches and yardage for him, because there are some concerns in the red zone usage. It's not like he's Bijan Robinson where it's a 73% snap rate and insane levels of efficiency overall. I'd have some qualms about James Cook. Facing Washington next week, decent defense. They haven't looked great so far, but the overall personnel is pretty okay. I'm a little bit lower on him on James Cook than I was before. Christian Kirk's role bounced back Sunday in a nice way. He led the team with 14 targets, and he lined up in the backfield on a good number of plays, which says to me they're trying to get him involved. Across 2 games, Kirk's target share is 23%. Calvin Ridley is at 26%. Zay Jones and Evan Engram both 18%. Now, Jones missed some time on Sunday due to an injury, did come back in, but, so maybe bump up his target share a bit. Kirk has the least deep work of the bunch, which makes sense if he's going to be like a slot-only guy now. Ridley and Jones have all the red zone work. I'm okay putting Kirk back in the discussion. It is concerning, though, that there will be game plans where he's just not involved if they go heavier personnel. So I'm okay with him. I did bump him up for sure, but still not overly enthused. They face Houston next week. Houston's defense did not play well without their 2 safeties in week number 3. So we'll be on the Jags once again, but I do want to be a bit cautious with Kirk in that matchup. Even with Deontay Foreman inactive, it was still a committee backfield for the Bears. Khalil Herbert played 59% of the snaps. Roschon Johnson was at 43%. Neither guy hit 60 yards from scrimmage. I'm not looking at anybody here unless they are in an incredible spot. Next week, they face the Chiefs, so likely a very negative game script. Maybe that does skew more towards Johnson than Herbert, but I'd rather not. I'd rather look at other offenses I have higher expectations for. Melvin Gordon was active for the Ravens, I believe, but did not play a snap. Backfield was still gross despite that. Justice Hill, 11 carries and 3 targets. Gus Edwards, 10 carries and 0 targets. It's hard to have a ceiling game like that, so I'm going to continue to pass in the Ravens backfield until further notice. Tank Dell popped up, had a really nice role this week for the Texans. He played 80% of the snaps, He led the team with 10 targets, one of which was deep. Robert Woods and Nico Collins both had 9 overall targets. 3 of those were deep. The Texans trailed big early, so they threw a bunch, very negative script, but all 3 guys had a 20% target share, and CJ Stroud was pretty efficient. So I'm kind of okay with this offense, at least for bring back options. I think they've done enough to earn that level of faith here. I'd rank Collins first, followed by Woods 2, and then Tank Dell 3. I think Woods is still going to be involved enough to be where he cuts into the appeal of Dell more so than Collins. Let's take a look here at some salaries. We need to save some salary in week 3 based on the other guys we've got. The Texans are on the road to face the Jags, so pretty pass-heavy script once again, likely. Nico Collins' salary, I think he deserves to be like 68, and he is 69. Fair. Tank Dell is 54. That's not bad. Again, I liked his role this week. Seems like he's earned a work, and it wasn't just like fluky snaps for Tank Dell. They placed Noah Brown on IR, so that's why his role went up. So 54 for Dell is not bad, and then Robert Woods, Bobby Trees is 58. So not bad across the board as far as salaries go for those guys, and that could be a route we say some salaries. Texans passing offense in week number 3. Jordan Addison got 3 deep targets on Thursday night for the Vikings. He had 1 in the opener. He played a lot of snaps in this one. He has to fight KJ Osborne and TJ Hawkinson for volume, but he's still worth monitoring despite that because the Vikings offense is pretty fun. They're facing the Chargers, and again, what should be the dumbest game of week 3, but also the highest scoring potentially. Addison's salary is, 68. That's too high. Osborne comes in at 56. I probably like KJ Osborne more than I like Addison at their respective salaries. Maybe that's probably stupid. Yeah, it's dumb. Okay, well, either way, I think that Addison's salary is a bit lofty. Hawkinson 75. My gosh, salaries are tight this week. Looking forward to the salary scroll and see if we can find any value on this slate. But Addison 68 is probably a little bit high for me right now. Seems like Josh Reynolds is in the DJ Chark role now for the Lions. And if you know me, you know I love the DJ Chark role where it's a guy who will get some deep work, be somewhat efficient on it. And that's kind of fun. He has Reynolds 3 more deep targets on Sunday, 2 touchdowns. His target share is 20% across 2 games. Sam Laporta is at 17%. I think they're both pretty viable when you want to stack Lions games. Obviously, we prefer Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it's not bad, especially in a game with what I think should be a pretty high total for Detroit and Atlanta. It's not super high right now, but I like the over in that game, at least on a first look there. Let's see here. Josh Reynolds, 3 deep targets in both games so far. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 2 in both. I kind of don't mind Josh Reynolds. Let's take a look at some salaries here. I'm worried to see, based on my guessing so far, I've been low on pretty much everyone. I would say Amon-Ra St. Brown is 80, deserves to be around 83 or so. He is 79. Okay. I know he's banged up. Left the game for part of it on Sunday, but did come back in. I'm assuming he's okay. He had a catch after that and looked pretty good. So Amon-Ra 79, that's not bad. That's like the one undersalary guy so far outside of Zach Moss. Reynolds, I would say Chark was usually around like upper 5s, low 6s. So let's say 62 for Josh Reynolds. He is 7,000. What in the world? This is deeply upsetting. I don't know how I'm going to feed my family in week 3 if they don't lower these salaries. That's bad. I mean, it's not bad. It's smart. But it's going to be very tough to find salary savers this week. And then let's check out Laporta. He was in the low 5s this week. I think he's like a 55 kind of tight end, and he is 52. Okay, there we go. So Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown might be our sources of value for stacking that Lions-Falcons game. Unfortunately, my guy, Josh Reynolds, is not. Alas, we gave it a run. Let's transition now into the salary scroll for week 3 and try to find some value because my goodness, salaries are high for week 3, at least based on the guys we've looked at thus far. Now, as far as the marquee games for week number 3, highest totals so far are for the Chargers and Vikings, 51.5. The Chiefs and the Bears, 49.5. And then I do, like I said, the Atlanta and Detroit game at 46.5. that's probably going to be the main games. I think the Jacksonville Houston game might be kind of fun as well. So starting off at quarterback, looking at salaries on the week 3 main slate over on FanDuel. Patrick Mahomes 92. I'll shout out if I see anybody who winds up being a little bit low. Tua Tagovailoa 81. If there's no Waddle, that becomes less attractive. But if Waddle were to be able to play, that could work out for sure. Scrolling down a bit further here, Dak at 76. I mentioned before how high the salaries were for Pollard and for Lamb. 76 for Dak is not terrible. He hasn't done a ton so far, but he hasn't had to. Maybe you won't have to against the Cardinals either, but that's somewhat interesting. Trevor Lawrence, 76, taking on Houston, struggled quite a bit in week number 2, but not going to face Chris Jones this time around. So maybe that does help him there. I think Lawrence will be in play at 76, and actually the mid 7,000 range is not terrible. Maybe I shouldn't go at Jared Goff, but like I think it could. We always say that with a pocket passer, you need to go for you need to have the potential to go for 350 and 4 touchdowns if you want to be like a perfect lineup quarterback without running. Goff, 323 and 3 touchdowns on Sunday, so he can do that. So maybe Goff winds up being in play. Deshaun Watson, 75, really tough matchup against Tennessee based on their front, but he ran a lot in week 1, so maybe we wind up seeing some interest there. Scrolling down further, I don't think I'm going to find a whole lot. Maybe Derek Carr, $6,900. I like that offense in week 1. Kind of want to see what they do in week 2, but Derek Carr, 69. That probably is stupid, but whatever. It's early in the week. I can be dumb now. Yep. Okay. So might have to dip into the mid 6,000 or mid 7,000 range of quarterback, looking at guys like Dak, Lawrence, Goff, Watson. Maybe that's where we go, but I think we might need to save some salary there. Running back, as mentioned, Pollard leads the way, 94. Bijan Robinson, 9,000 with Nick Chubb at 86. Let's scroll here and see if we can find some under salary guys. ETN apparently got banged up on Sunday. Oh, cramping. Okay, so that's fine. 8,000 a bit high for a guy who still has some red zone concerns. Didn't pop up on Sunday, but that's because they were barely in the red zone. So I think that those concerns are still present. Montgomery, 72, Gibbs, 7,000, James Cook, 69, fine, I get it. Miles Sanders facing Seattle. Spread in that game, at least as of this morning, was 4.5 for the Panthers on the road. Sanders got 6 targets in week 1, didn't do a whole lot with it overall with his volume, but that's not bad. Raheem Mostert, 66 again. He probably is not going to have a lot of yardage juice, which is concerning, but he's at least out there. Maybe if there's no Waddle, he gets more targets. I kind of doubt that. And A-Chain, I'd expect to continue to get ramped up as things go along. Here we go. Maybe this is one. Ramondre Stevenson, $6,500, taking on the New York Jets. Ramondre last night in that game, 15 carries and 3 targets, only 60 yards, but Ramondre, 3 out of 5 red zone chances. Back in week number 1, Stevenson, 12 carries, 6 targets, 89 yards. So the yardage has not been there because the offense has been dinged up, the offensive line especially. Facing a very tough Jets defense, but it's probably a bit easier to run on them than throw on them. Maybe Stevenson or Zach Moss wind up saving us some salary. Stevenson, 65, Moss is 64. Alexander Mattison obviously had a pretty rough game in week number 2, 8 carries and 6 targets. Still at a 75% snap rate. The concern would be that the fumbles eventually lead to Ty Chandler getting more work there, but I think you could justify taking some swipes at a guy like Madison at 63, given we'll probably have to save some salary. So he's at least on the radar for this week. Javonte Williams taking on Miami at $6,100. Been getting a lot of passing game work. Javonte on Sunday, 12 carries, 3 targets, 58 yards, 1 out of 10 red zone chances, played, I think, 28 snaps for the second consecutive week. So snap count has not increased as of yet, but that's not a bad salary for him. Joshua Kelly, mentioned before the concerns around him, but his salary 61, a lot easier to run on Minnesota than it is on the Titans. If there's no Eckler, I'd probably go back to Kelly. Again, no target, only 1 target, but a lot of routes run. I think that could be enough to make him viable this week. So maybe we're spending down the 6,000 range at running back. That could be the way we go. Isaiah Pacheco, played more than half the snaps on Sunday. I know I shouldn't do this, and I really don't want to, but like he's facing the Bears. Maybe the matchup is enough to jack him up. 12 carries, 2 targets, 70 yards from scrimmage for Pacheco. 3 out of 8 red zone chances. I think his role is a little bit better than maybe perception, but 57 is low enough. So it might be a week where we use some pretty gross value plays at running back in order to get to some other guys we like. Wide receiver, of course, you got Jefferson 97, Tyreek Hill 96, Keenan Allen 88, CeeDee Lamb 85. All those guys make a lot of sense. Kind of surprised Stephon Diggs is 8,000 still, given that he's had a pretty massive workload each of the first 2 weeks, 13 targets in the first game, 7 in the second. I'm not usually a Diggs guy, but maybe compared to the other guys I can get there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 79. Again, I think that's low for him, assuming that he does wind up being okay. Again, it was cramping that took him out. He looked fine after he came back in. I like him. I think 79 is a good number for him and probably a guy I want to get to. Calvin Ridley bumped back down to 75, but if you kind of take his 2 games together, I think his role has been good enough to justify that. Taking on the Texans here, again, that secondary is banged up, specifically at safety. Ridley so far, a 26% target share with 38% of the deep work. Only 3 deep targets so far because they haven't thrown deep a lot, but should be better able to do so against this Texans team than against the Chiefs. So Ridley at 75 is intriguing to me. Scrolling down here a bit further, trying to find some value at wide receiver. Gabe Davis' role was okay in week 2. 67 is probably appropriate for him. Michael Pittman, 67. He's had double-digit targets in both games so far. Only 1 deep target overall. And Minshew is like fine as a quarterback. If it winds up being him, I could see that being a good bring back for Ravens teams, though, especially with that secondary being banged up. So Pittman at least is fine at 67. DeAndre Hopkins, 66. That ankle's kind of concerning. DJ Moore, 64. Again, negative game script for the Bears. Maybe that winds up working out okay. Zay Flowers back down to 63. Okay, I got to stop saying every salary. That's probably annoying. Rashid Shaheed is 6,000. Maybe I'll talk myself into that by the time we get to Sunday. All right, Jaden Reed's 59. With Watson coming back, not really sure what his workload will look like, but that's not the worst. Again, Woods at 58 is okay. 10 and 9 targets, 3 deep targets, I think in both games for Robert Woods. Let me check that really quick here. He had, oopsies, scrolled too far down. All right, Robert Woods in week 1, 1 deep target, then 3 in week 2. 58 is not a terrible number for him. So maybe we wind up being on him, given the salary is somewhat low there. Scrolling down into the mid 5,000 range at wide receiver, if Chark's role tonight is okay, his salary is 56. I could see that being okay. Kadarius Toney, like I don't know, 5 targets again. He looked better this time around, but he's not I don't really want to go at anybody in that passing game right now, to be fully honest with you. Tank Dell, 54. That might wind up being our value play of the week, just because we really do want to save some salary somewhere, and he does get us that. Had 10 targets this week, partly due to the script, but still somewhat worth mentioning there. Getting down to the low 5,000 range, Justin Watson has actually been getting a lot of deep work for the Chiefs, plays a lot of snaps too, 45 and 62 yards so far. I don't hate it. It's not the worst thing in the world I've ever seen. But obviously not going to be super drawn towards that. Finally, a tight end. Mark Andrews is in the slate. His salary is down to 74. I think that's intriguing, given that he is now a week further removed from his injury. So don't mind that at all. And then there's nobody in the 6,000 range at all at tight end. Evan Ingram is next to him at 59. Ingram again, 18% target share so far, 49 and 57 yards. I don't think that's terrible. I remember before, though, we were looking at Laporta down in the low 5,000 range. Laporta is 52. Dalton Kincaid, 5,000. Hasn't had the best role as of yet. 4 and 6 targets. Been an okay role, though. Just not a lot of deep work for him so far, which is somewhat disappointing. Jake Ferguson, another big game on Sunday as far as targets go with 4. Only 22 yards so far, but, getting some work at least. Maybe that's not as intriguing as I thought it was. before I clicked in there. Durham Smythe, 48. So again, at tight end, you're kind of betting against Kelsey, Hawkinson, and Andrews, but not a lot of salary overall to be had for week number 2. So I think we're going to be scrounging for salary pretty much across the board in week 3. It's going to be dicey for sure. That is all that we have here for today on our week 2 NFL DFS recap. Make sure to join us once again Thursday for the week 3 preview podcast. That will be live over on the FanDuel YouTube page at 10 a.m. Eastern. It'll go up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that, and also over on FanDuel TV Plus. Go to FanDuel.com/watch. Or check out FanDuel TV Plus on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku as well. You can watch Up and Adams live by logging into your FanDuel account. And also watch the Heat Check NFL shows, the Solo Shot, and Covering the Spread, all in the same place. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast and FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in. Good luck on the 2-game slate tonight. We'll talk to you once again Thursday to get you ready for week number 3. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.